Outsourcing list building. Offshore. Pros and cons. Why offshore list building is on the table. If you've ever watched your SDRs burn a morning in LinkedIn filters, tabs, and spreadsheets, you've seen the core problem. List building is essential to outbound, but it steals time from selling. Salesforce research puts it bluntly. Reps spend only 28% of their week actually selling, with the rest swallowed by admin and research. When your team is paid to talk to prospects, that trade-off becomes expensive fast. That's why sales outsourcing conversations often start with list building. Offshore teams can handle the repetitive sourcing and enrichment work, while your onshore reps focus on calls, email, and discovery. In theory, this is one of the cleanest buy-back time moves a sales development agency or RevOps team can make. But offshore list building is a leverage play, not a shortcut. If you optimize only for cost, you can end up with a CRM full of noise, a busy outbound sales agency motion, and a pipeline that looks healthy in dashboards but weak in reality. The goal is simple. Capture the cost and speed advantages without letting data quality, compliance, or ICP alignment slip. What list building really includes and what should stay in-house. In modern B2B list building services, getting contacts is only one piece of the work. Strong programs start with ICP definition, account selection, and a targeting schema that explains what qualified means in objective terms: industry, size, buying committee roles, tech stack signals, and disqualifiers. When those rules are fuzzy, offshore researchers will fill the gap with guesses, and your lists will drift away from what actually converts. As a rule, we recommend keeping strategy, compliance review, and QA ownership onshore and offshoring the repeatable research steps: contact sourcing, enrichment, and initial formatting. This split protects your decision-making while still capturing the labor leverage that makes offshore work attractive. It also creates cleaner accountability. Your team defines correct, and the offshore team produces to that standard. The economics behind the interest are real. With an average U.S. SDR salary around $92,898, using that same resource to manually compile and verify data is rarely the best use of budget. Offshore can be a strong fit for B2B list building services when the workflow is well-defined and the acceptance criteria are measurable. Choosing an offshore model: savings, control, and accountability. Most teams evaluate offshore list building because outsourcing can reduce labor costs by 40 to 70%, depending on the function and how it's structured. The offshore ecosystem is also mature and massive. One example is the Philippines contact center industry, which generated $31.5 billion in revenue and employed about 1.62 million people in 2024. Scale like that means talent pools, management layers, and operational rhythms already exist. You're not inventing the category from scratch. What you are choosing, though, is how much control you want versus how much you want to delegate. Hiring offshore staff directly can give you the most control, but you also inherit training, QA, tool access, and performance management. A third-party vendor can move faster, but quality and transparency vary widely, especially when pricing encourages volume over accuracy. This is why hybrid delivery has become so common across sales outsourcing, cold email agency workflows, and cold calling services. It mirrors where the broader BPO market is going. The global market was about $315.46 billion in 2024 and is projected to reach $840.6 billion by 2034, which signals that offshore is no longer experimental. It's mainstream operations when governed correctly. How to implement offshore list building without breaking your pipeline. The biggest implementation mistake we see is treating offshore list building as a one-time CSV purchase instead of an operating system. Start by mapping every workflow step: ICP definition, account selection, contact sourcing, enrichment, QA, compliance review, and CRM import, and assigning ownership for each. Offshore should own only the repeatable research steps, while your team owns the rules, acceptance criteria, and final approval. Next, run a controlled 4-week pilot with blind A/B testing across at least 3 buckets: your in-house list, vendor A, and vendor B, or a partner like SalesHive. Have SDRs prospect each bucket with the same messaging and cadence so you can compare meetings booked, opportunity creation, and no-show rates. This avoids the common trap of choosing the cheapest provider before you know whether the data actually produces pipeline. Finally, build a staging layer between offshore outputs and your CRM. Whether it's a warehouse, a controlled spreadsheet workflow, or a platform layer, the point is to validate, dedupe, enrich, and standardize before anything touches Salesforce or HubSpot. This single step prevents permanent contamination of your CRM and makes it easy to roll back a bad batch without weeks of cleanup. If you can't measure list quality in revenue outcomes, you're not outsourcing list building, you're outsourcing your standards. KPIs, QA, and contracts that actually work. The hidden cost of cheap offshore lists is bad data at scale. Gartner estimates poor data quality costs organizations around $12.9 million per year on average, and many teams feel the pain directly. 42% of B2B marketers report insufficient quality data as a major lead generation challenge. If you import low-quality records, you don't just waste research spend, you waste SDR cycles, harm deliverability, and distort reporting. To prevent that, define list quality KPIs before you sign an MSA and make those KPIs enforceable. Don't let records delivered be the success metric. It's too easy to game. Instead, measure what matters to your outbound sales agency motion: bounce rate, direct dial connect rate, ICP match rate, and meeting to opportunity conversion by list source. Operationally, the simplest discipline is a weekly spot check. Pull a random sample, verify titles and companies against the ICP, test a subset of emails, phones, and record pass-fail reasons. This is also where expert oversight matters. Your best results come when RevOps and SDR leadership review the same scorecard and coach the vendor with specific examples, not vague feedback. Security, privacy, and compliance: the risks you can't ignore. Outsourcing list building can introduce real security and privacy exposure, especially when vendors request CRM access or move data through unmanaged channels. In fact, 46% of organizations cite data security and privacy risks as the biggest barrier to outsourcing critical functions. For B2B teams, the risk isn't theoretical. One sloppy permission set or untracked export can turn into a compliance incident and a trust problem internally. The fix is a least privilege posture from day one. Give offshore teams only what they need, require SSO and MFA where possible, and avoid direct CRM access unless the provider can meet your security standards. Use DPAs, NDAs, data handling policies in your MSA, and log every bulk import-export so you can audit who touched what and when. A common mistake is letting security be an afterthought because it's just prospect data. That mindset breaks down quickly once you consider enrichment fields, campaign performance data, and notes that can reveal strategy. Treat offshore list building like you would any vendor supporting your sales development agency stack. Vet, document, restrict, monitor, and revalidate routinely. Making offshore lists work for cold email and cold calling. A list is only good if it performs in-channel. For a cold email agency motion, that means low bounce rates, correct roles, and segmentation that supports personalized messaging. For B2B cold calling services, it means usable phone data and clean account hierarchies so reps don't waste dials. If offshore teams optimize for volume, you'll see activity go up while replies, connects, and meetings go down. This is where a hybrid partner model can outperform pure DIY or commodity vendors. At SalesHive, we sit at the intersection of offshore efficiency and onshore quality. We keep ICP strategy, targeting rules, and performance management tight, while using offshore-supported execution to move faster and keep costs controlled. Since 2016, we've booked 100,000-plus meetings for 1,500-plus B2B clients by combining list building, cold calling services, and email outreach in one system, so list quality is accountable to pipeline outcomes. If you're evaluating an outsourced sales team or looking to hire SDRs, insist that list building and outreach are measured together. When list providers only hand over a CSV, they can claim success even when your SDRs struggle. When the same system owns targeting, list build, and execution, it's much harder for bad data to hide. That alignment is often the difference between more contacts and a steady flow of qualified meetings. A practical decision framework for 2026 planning. Offshore list building is becoming more standard as outsourcing matures, but the winning teams don't treat it as a procurement decision. They treat it as a revenue system. If your ICP is stable, your compliance risk is manageable, and you're willing to invest in governance, offshore can be a strong lever to increase SDR capacity without increasing headcount. If your ICP is evolving weekly, your segmentation is messy, or you don't have QA bandwidth, keep it closer to home until the fundamentals are in place. Operationally, anchor the program around 3 recurring habits: weekly list QA spot checks, monthly list health reviews with SDR leadership and RevOps, and quarterly vendor scorecards tied to pipeline outcomes. That cadence turns offshore list building from a set-it-and-forget-it risk into a controllable performance engine. It also makes it easy to cut underperforming sources quickly before they create months of downstream damage. If you want to move fast, start with a pilot, a staging layer, and a KPI-based contract. Then scale only what proves it can create meetings and opportunities. Offshore can absolutely support a high-performing outbound sales agency motion, including cold calling agency and cold email agency execution, but only when quality and security are designed in from day one. The goal isn't offshore for its own sake. It's predictable pipeline at a lower cost per validated contact.